actual existence? Because I imagine you guys probably get a lot of people that, how can I put it? A lot of pessimists about it. People that don't really. A lot of pessimists.
Well, skepticism.
Skeptics. Excuse me.
Well, we actually think that's a healthy thing as long as it's done constructively. I have to say that you're talking to probably one of the biggest skeptics you've ever met. That was up until April 3rd of 1993, when this skeptic had a rather epic moment, if you will. An epiphany that changed my mind.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because I was looking at some stuff here, and you said something that you had your first Bigfoot experience actually back, what was it, 93, from what you were saying. You want to tell us a little bit about that, kind of the abridged version?
So April, it was actually during a military exercise. It was April 3rd of 93. I know you're familiar with the 1249th Combat Engineers.
Right.
At that time, I was a E5 sergeant, squad leader. And once a year, we'd go up into the Coast Range to do some rather large explosive screening.
I'll say doing the demo range up there just outside of Seaside.
Yeah, well, it's not a demo range per se. What it was is there's a timber company that owns a huge tract of land just east of Seaside.
Right.
And they would allow us to go in there and access these rock quarries or gravel quarries that they had on their sites. We had 3 different places, 3 different quarries that we were doing different types of explosives. And we had gotten to the last exercise, which was a cratering charge. And we lit the fuses, and as, per SOP, we get in our convoy and get the heck out of there and get down to a safety area where we could wait for the explosion and go back and check our work.
Right.
And it was as we were convoying down to this staging area that I sat as a passenger behind the driver in a Humvee. And it was a decent day for April in the Coast Range. And I had the window rolled down, and I'm having hunted that area extensively for deer and elk. I'm looking about the countryside, naturally just looking for any kind of wildlife, and I got a little more than I bargained for. We rounded this corner where the second blast site, the one we had detonated maybe an hour before, came into clear view. And as it did, I'm looking at these 3 jet black figures standing out in the quarry, out in the open, across this ravine, standing shoulder to shoulder, facing our convoy, and obviously observing us as we're descending the hillside across the ravine. And at first thought, I'm like, what the hell are those people doing there? And then really, I didn't even get to finish the thought, because I realized almost immediately I wasn't looking at people at all. And so I saw these 3 creatures for a total of about 25 seconds, and doesn't sound like a long time, but it's an eternity when you're looking at what I saw. Right,
especially once the adrenaline and stuff gets pumping. That 25 seconds seems like it's forever.
Yeah, and what made this even more interesting is once we got down to the staging area, I kind of jogged back up the road a ways, hoping to get another view of them. And as I'm standing there kind of looking off into the distance, another soldier approached me, seeing that I was gazing off in the distance there, and I hear Sergeant Martin go, "Hey, Niess." And I look over, I go, "Yeah," and he goes, What are you looking at?" And I said, "Nothing." And he came up right up to me and kind of looked over both his shoulders to make sure nobody else was in earshot. And he goes, "I don't suppose you saw what I saw down at that second blast site." I'm not going to be a fool. So I said, "I don't know, Jeff, what do you see?" And
so there was 2 of you that seen it then.
That's when he said, "Yeah, I saw 3 jet black, hair-covered Bigfoot."
Wow. So you had any other reports and stuff coming out of the same area then from other people that may have seen it?
Oh yes, I have obviously a strong connection with the Coast Range sightings, and we have had just scores of them coming out of all up and down the Oregon coast, well into Washington and Northern California as well.
Gotcha. So most of your research focuses primarily on the West Coast then, versus out throughout the rest of the country. Or do you work with any other organizations or anyone throughout the rest of the country, or what's up?
Yeah, we're affiliated with a number of different groups. The Olympic Project, which obviously is up in the Olympic National Park in northern Washington. As far as cross country, we're affiliated with the group in Florida, actually. They have some similar creature over there that they refer to as a skunk ape. But I've done some research mostly in the Pacific Northwest.
Gotcha. Yeah, I was talking with some buddies of mine. They actually host a show here on VRS as well with my buddy Albert and Chris. They run a show called Tinfoil Vets. I actually spoke with them here. They had me as a guest on their show on Tuesday night. And I told them that you were coming on, and those guys were pretty excited about it. They're like, "Oh man!" and trying to get a hold of them here earlier, but haven't had much success with trying to get them on the line. So I don't know if they got tied up with some or what. Because I know, especially Albert. Albert's just like, I think I heard of this guy before. And Chris said they have something similar to what we have out here on the Pacific Northwest. What was it, Josh? He called him? The big muddy monster or something like that back there in Illinois or some shit like that.
Yeah, I can't remember exactly what he called them, but something right along those lines.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's weird because you get, different parts of the country, they call them different things. But, I mean, essentially, if you think about it, it's more or less along the lines as being the same creature, I guess. I mean, I imagine there's got to be some genetic makeups, but...
Yeah. Ohio's got the grass man. Arkansas has the folk monster, which the Legend of Boggy Creek movie was made about. Missouri has Momo. There's just a number of across the country, and I've been to a lot of those places, but I mainly focus on the Pacific Northwest.
Gotcha. Now, didn't hear what was it a year or two ago or something like that? You actually worked with the guys. What was that program? Finding Bigfoot. Didn't you do some work with those guys before as well? I think from some past conversations you and I have had in person. Because you and I both are down there with them. I think you said something about that.
Well, no, I know all those guys personally, with the exception of the Renee, the female, Bobo, and Matt Moneymaker, and Cliff Berrickman. I know quite well. Cliff actually lives just outside of Portland. Actually, just bought a place outside of Sandy.
Oh wow!
We're all good friends. I have not been on their show. I will say this: it's kind of funny. When I was back in Iraq in 2010, I was doing night security, and knowing that it was daytime back home, well, I started dialing for dollars, calling friends. You know how it is, and I got patched through to Cliff Berrickman, and this was before the show
that charged to go on
came on.
Go on an expedition to Cliff Berrickman. That's what he charges to go into the forest.
Cliff told me at that time in 2010, there's a show they want me to participate in, and lo and behold, it was Finding Bigfoot. And they went on for 5 seasons.
Yeah, I actually used to be was a pretty big fan of that show, because I mean, I try to look at things objectively, when I listen to what people have to say, or even through my own experiences, I try to look at things open-mindedly, but, factually and objectively. I kind of use, as a comparison, kind of like Renee's point of view. If there's something there, I want to see evidence of it. But if it's something that I see with my own 2 eyes, and I know what I see, then absolutely, yeah. Even though I may not have any physical evidence of it, just like with the experience you had. And I'm not gonna lie, I myself, I'm a believer. I'm a believer in that guy. Oh yeah. Absolutely.
It just amazes me how 25 seconds of my entire existence on this planet literally changed the direction of my life.
Oh, absolutely.
We talked about this a little bit. I can't unsee what I saw, and I make no apologies.
Absolutely not. You shouldn't have to.
Well, it's just I can't take credit for it either. I mean, it's just a matter of right place, right time. You know, it's almost like a lottery. But being that as it may, we've been looking ever since. And for me, it's been 25 years. And, you know, whether I'll ever see him again, I don't know. I've been close on a few occasions. I've only seen him once. But in 98, I did an expedition up on Saddle Mountain, and I got almost too close. I had one let loose a horrifically loud screaming roar from very close range.
Oh, wow.
I didn't see it, but I'll tell you what, I've jumped out of perfectly good working airplanes and been shot at and swam with sharks. I mean, you name it. I've never been more
But something like that,
life.
it raises a hair up on the back of your neck. I mean, almost every hair on your body just stands straight up. I mean, when I was 16, you know, I'm not gonna lie. When I was 16, I actually had an experience, and my younger cousin Jeremy can attest to this because he was with me when it happened. And well, once when I was younger, when I was about 13, 14, I actually went through an area. I mean, just the smell, you know, and everything else is just like, you know, the smell, the eeriness, the stillness. I mean, because even out in the timber, you know, up in the woods up here in the Pacific Northwest, you know, especially down there in the coast, because I was actually just outside Manzanita in the woods up there, what they call God's Valley area.
Oh, I know it well.
And was up there elk hunting. And, I mean, it's just, the woods up there, they have a certain feel to them. And even in the middle of fall, they do. And it's just, everything was way more still than what it usually is. And I heard something off of the brush, and it was almost like that musty, wet dog smell. Mm-hmm. Just, you know, but just really, really like a wet dog and like 4-day-old foot funk. You know, is the best way to describe it.
So you mean how Carl Smobin got out of the Jeep today here?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
God, you guys.
Yeah,
but
these things are known to have a pretty putrid smell to them.
Yeah. And, you know, like I said, a couple of years later, you know, and I caught a brief glimpse of somewhat, I wasn't sure, but, you know, my dad's told me stories about it from him being out in the woods hunting and coming across them, as well as some of the other guys that I grew up hunting with. There was that. There's also my younger cousin Jeremy, like I was saying, a couple of years after I had my experience, we went actually up to go track down an elk that that my dad had put down the night before, and we had to go back in the next morning to go after because we ran out of light. And excuse me, and in the frost and the mud, because you know how the clay out here out on the coast, it's weird because when it gets to a certain temperature and goes to chill, it actually crystallizes. I know you've seen it, and in the freaking ice crystals, there was like 2 fresh prints that just stood out. And I looked at that, and as soon as I saw what it was, you know, everything just stood up on the back of my neck, and my cousin looks at me and he's like, "What is that?" I was like, "Dude, yeah, we're going to come back later." We're going to come back later. I got Carl looking at me like he's got something to say on this topic.
I used to not be a believer. I'll be straight and up and honest, right? Until I was probably about 13 years old, I was out camping at Camp Sherman. Or not Camp Sherman, it was up in the Hochko Mountains. And we pulled in, we set up camp, and about 1:30 in the morning, it wasn't a cougar, it wasn't a bear, it wasn't something fighting with something. It was just this blood-curdling scream that just made you stand up, and this smell, and we heard these two thumps, and then it was gone. Just gone. And like that's when I was like, oh boy, I know what that.
The Ochocos, the Blue Mountains, the Ochocos, and certainly the Cascades and coastal ranges have quite a bit of history on encounters, so you might have been onto something. I'll have to tell you, to be honest with you guys, if I hadn't seen what I saw, I'd still be a skeptic.
Right.
But I can't unsee what I saw. And I meant to follow up, you know, being a traditional guardsman back in those days, you know, we do a drill once a month. And the very next drill in May, we had 2 other soldiers come forward and claim to have seen the same thing. Same number of animals.
Oh, man.
So, I mean, there's 4 eyewitnesses that independently saw them.
That's nuts.
So it makes it kind of a unique, you know, not aside from the fact that we're blowing the shit out of their home. So,
and that's the one thing that kind of gets me about it too, is that, you know, it's weird because you would think with the demo going off, it would actually